Hello, I am Jake Collins, and this is my 16th and final Knightmare episode commentary. This is Knightmare Series 8, Episode 9, which was first broadcast on the 4th of November 1994. Before we get on to the shortcut, I'll just mention a few other things from the whole of Series 8 that I don't like. This introductory bit with Tregard and Majida is the worst of any episode opening. I've been analysing all the different ways that episodes of Knightmare begin, and this is my least favourite of any of them. It's kind of based on the Tregard and the gold coins opening from last time, but it tells us so much less, hardly anything at all, and it's presented as a badly rhyming verse, with Tregard and Majida alternating some very suspect things to say, which really don't give us much information at all. Here's something I do quite like, Smirkanov in this pit. Given that we can't have dragon flight sequences anymore, with the way the quest works now, the format of this series, it's nice to see Smirkanov in his pit with the more detailed facial movements of the new puppet. A good way to include him in Series 8, and what a shame he only sneaks in at the end. For the last 4 episodes, the last 3 quests. That's something from Series 8 that I would like to see done in a proper, better series of Knightmare. What does that intro with Tregard and Majida tell us? All Tregard tells us on his first badly rhyming couplet is where the team is from. Majida then tells us their names, and Tregard tells us what their quest is. Not accurately in the case of Michael's team, it has to be said, and that's all we get to know. Nothing about what objects, spells, tasks the team are dealing with at the moment. It tells you absolutely nothing. We get the 3 identical openings with the information about Daniel's team, scant information about Daniel's team, in episodes 2, 3 and 4. Dear, 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 no. That's one of the pieces of presentation in Series 8 that is so bad. There are some more that I didn't mention last time. The VR graphic version of the spyglass that you see when the Dungeoneer is holding it up. The new versions of the scroll opening up on screen. And the spell book coming in instead of the letters being spelt out on screen when someone is spellcasting. They all look terrible. Like absolute crap. Tim Child obviously thinks they're new, exciting, innovative graphics. Wow, fantastic VR world I'm creating. But they look horrible. For one thing, particularly with the spyglass, they look fake. That obviously isn't the spyglass that the Dungeoneer is holding up. It doesn't exist in the same world as the Dungeoneer. It's stepping towards that whole VR world with avatars for the players that we see in the Knightmare VR pilot from 2004. It is taking, or beginning to take, all the Knightmare out of Knightmare. So perhaps in some ways it's no bad thing that Tim Child wasn't allowed to make any more Knightmare before he completely ruined it, although in some ways he's completely ruining it right now with the shortcut. The absolute final straw about the shortcut for me is that whatever discussion you want to have about it, it's not even necessary to include it for the reasons that are given. There's no time to complete a whole quest before the end of the series. What rubbish! If there's time to get Oliver's team to level 3 quickly, doing about 6 chambers, there's time for Dunstan to have a 5 or 6 chamber level 2 and win after completing 3 levels, if indeed they get that far, which I'm sure Tim Child was going to make happen by hook or by crook. Nobody would mind then. Nobody would complain if Dunstan had a bit of a short level 2. Nathan has a bit of a short level 2. It took me years to notice that, because the initial impression after watching this that we'd come away with after that very first all-important viewing is that everything had gone as normal, fine. The team had won excitingly at the very end of the series after completing 3 levels. There would never be any problem with that. The shortcut is so stupid and so unnecessary. That's really the final straw. But there are plenty more straws along the way. One thing I've always maintained, realised, is that we really can't blame the team themselves. I don't rate Dunstan's team at all. I think their communication is terrible to the point of being practically non-existent. I don't think they'd have any chance of winning under normal circumstances, but they, like the rest of us, are victims of Tim Child and his manipulative ways. Of course the team would like to think they had a choice in the matter. Oh yes, well, we had the weekend to think about whether to take the shortcut. That's why we took the red key to level 2 in case we decided to go to level 2 after all. The choice was never really theirs. Tim Child does whatever he wants. And in this case, it's to get Dunstan's team to level 3 and force a win by the end of the series. But yeah, that's not the team's fault, even though I don't think they're a very good team. I hold no personal grudge against any of them for this. In fact, they're so much less annoying and better at playing the game than Oliver's team that I chose episode 9 rather than Knightmare's final episode, episode 10, to do this commentary on. If we get into the territory of talking about Oliver's team, any kind of balance to any argument I might present would completely go out of the window, because I only have bad things to say about that team, though advisor Anthony is pretty efficient at the Corridor of Blades. Now, while we must always bear this in mind that Dunstan's team, and indeed Oliver's team, aren't to blame for what happened with the shortcut, the fact is that I've never seen anyone express an opinion about the shortcut who is not a member of Dunstan's team that says, I'm okay with it, I don't mind it, I think it was a reasonable decision, I don't think it hurt the show. Because, on the first watch through, I think it was pretty obvious to everyone that it was hurting the show. For really, the first time watching Knightmare, I was thinking, hang on, this is wrong. This shouldn't be happening. Skipping a whole level? That is not a legitimate way to win. And as I've said before, that initial impression is what sticks with us. We can look back later and say, oh well, all the winning quests are kind of manipulated, except Julie's. But that doesn't matter when you're first watching it. The most really anyone can do is present a balanced argument of, well, I can kind of see why they did it, we can't blame the team. It's nice to see the corridor of blades, but you'd be hard pushed to find a Knightmare fan who's not part of Dunstan's team saying, oh yeah, I'm fine with the shortcut. It's a perfectly legitimate thing to do. Computer games have cheats, bypassing bits if you can find a shortcut. Why shouldn't Knightmare? As I've explained before, because Knightmare is not a computer game, it's a TV show, an adventure game show that owes its loyal fans more than this ridiculous deviation and cheat that we're being forced to witness here at the end. It was summed up very well in the paper issues of the iShield fanzine, with David Bradshaw and Stephen Wilson's History of Knightmare, which was a feature that ran all through the A5 booklet versions of the iShield, from issues 4 to 9. And it was a detailed article from these two Knightmare fans about their Knightmare memories and experiences. It told the story of how David and Stephen had bonded at primary school over Knightmare, talking about Knightmare, and were still best friends and really into Knightmare all these years later. And I thought, yes, that's the kind of thing, logically, that should have happened to me at school, but it never did. But never mind. They also told us about their audition for Series 8. It was a very interesting article, and a kind of emotionally engaging article, I thought, as a Knightmare fan. But David and Stephen, of course, went into their thoughts about shortcuts. And one thing they said was about Barry in level 3 at the end of Series 7. We weren't sure if he should have won because he'd taken a massive shortcut. That was the impression they came away from the show with, because Barry had gone through a door marked shortcut as part of his level 3, even though Barry's quest is the longest quest ever. He goes through every single room in level 3 that anyone appears in Series 7, and the Corridor of Blades. It's not a shortcut at all, but that's how it appears to the viewer, because it says it's a shortcut. I think that illustrates very nicely how it's that initial impression we're left with that sticks with us and that we judge the show by. And David and Stephen went on to say, a year later, with Series 8, we'd come up with a different answer than the one we'd come up with for Barry. Barry did deserve to win, they thought, even though he'd taken a massive shortcut. Although the truth was that he hadn't, the impression they were left with was he had taken one within level 3, but it was okay. But by cutting out an entire level here, Dunstan's team didn't receive the full challenge and therefore didn't deserve to win. That is a perfect summing up of what is wrong with the shortcut. That is how it appears on that all-important first watch through. Dunstan's team has skipped a level, they haven't received the full challenge, they don't deserve to win. Whatever the ins and outs of other teams deserving to win or not deserving to win, that is how it appears here on that first watch through, thanks to the shortcut. And it is why I've always hated the end of Series 8, the end of Knightmare. It left me with that impression. and I still have it, and that's the important thing. In the final episode, when Dunstan's jumping down to the pool area to join his team and the victory music is playing, I'm thinking, it's not proper. It's not real. They haven't done it properly. What a disservice to almost lifelong Knightmare viewers that is. And I will never forgive Tim Child for it. Really, I think it's the reason that I was so desperate to see Knightmare come back for Series 9 in 1995. Yes, as I mentioned last time, I was always desperate to see it come back. But particularly that time, I didn't want the end of Series 8 to be the end of Knightmare, because it had stuck in my craw so much and I completely hated it. It's difficult to see how they would have come back from it, really. Would they have had to come up with some excuse why the shortcut couldn't be used anymore? There's even been speculation about, they were going to introduce level 4, so it'd be back to 3 levels. I mean, how pointless is that? I don't know how much truth there is in that. There weren't really concrete plans for Knightmare Series 9 in place. It's probably just a rumour but it's a sort of stupid thing Tim Child would do. Oh, that life force symbol, that's the other crap graphic presentation in Series 8. How could I forget that? The stupid cake pie thing. My first ever objection to it was, well, it doesn't move. There's nothing coming off it and making it seem like, their life force is ticking away. But it looks horrible anyway. And that's Series 8 for you. It looks horrible. It is horrible. It's hard to see how Knightmare would have come back from the shortcut, and it's a let off for Tim Child that he never had to try and make it come back from that. I really believe if I'd seen in the Radio Times that day, 1995, when I had my breakdown on Wigan Holt Common in West Sussex, and it's no exaggeration to say it was a complete mental breakdown. If I'd seen in the Radio Times that day, Knightmare, the fantasy adventure game show with Hugo Myers and Jackie Suarez, returns for a final 10-part series, I think I'd have been quite happy with that. I'd have been able to come to terms with that. I'd have been able to watch a final 10-part series, knowing it was the end, knowing that Series 8 wasn't going to be the ultimate end of Knightmare. I wouldn't have been happy that the show was ending, but I'd have been able to come to terms with it a lot more easily. As we know, this was tentatively on the cards at one point. Tim Child was asked to choose between Knightmare and Virtually Impossible, with the proviso that Series 9 would be the end of Knightmare. Looking to his future, he went for Virtually Impossible. You can't really blame him for that. You can blame him for a lot, but you can't blame him for that. And in the end, he wasn't allowed to make either of them anyway. Serve him right. But goodness me, if there are parallel universes where that final 10-episode Series 9 run were made, I really think my mental breakdown would not have happened. And I would have been able to come to terms with whatever did happen quite happily. That bit is the very best example of Dunstan's team's terrible communication, yelling turn right and so on. And he's not doing it. They're not potential winners, really. They don't cast a spell throughout their entire quest. That's not their fault, unlike their communication. That one is Tim Child's fault. But it shows that the quest is wrong in its makeup, overly short, overly simplistic. A winning quest with no level 2 and no spell casting? No, thank you. I do like Linghorn and Marblehead as a continuation of the plot with Lord Fear and his power in the dungeon. As I was saying before, if Maldomade was Greystag, that would be even better. Continuation of their power struggle. But Goth moving up to level 2? Oh, level 2, what's that? You don't know if you watched this episode. And the journey through Linghorn and Marblehead being level 3. I like that. As I was saying last time, fundamentally, there's nothing wrong with Series 8. But in execution, it's all gone totally pear-shaped. So many things seem to end on a bitter note. I was talking last time about those mainstay people and things in my life that were whisked away from me in 1994. None of them in a very pleasant, serviceable state, and quite difficult, distressing to see when they were around in 1994. Snapperjack is another decent part of Series 8, I think. When Paul McIntosh did Remember Him with Snapperjack for the Eye Shield, I was surprised how much Paul seemed to hate Snapperjack with his silly Snapdragon puppet and his silly voice. And I thought, oh yes, I suppose that's true. But I did like the way he reintroduced questions into Knightmare. Unlike Brolican, Snapperjack actually knows the answers. So he's a real threat. And let's give Dunstan and team their due here. They're the only team apart from Daniel's team to actually get all 3 of Snapperjack's questions correct. The other teams only manage 2 gets you through. To see them do this and then go on and win. See those 2 scenes isolated. There'd be nothing wrong with that, would there? But the build-up we've had with the shortcut, oh dear me, there's everything wrong with it. I was reminded, preparing for this commentary, about when I mentioned Clifford Norgate and David Verey having never appeared in an episode together, despite doing a series together, Series 3. And I noticed this is the only episode of Series 8, therefore the only episode of Knightmare, which has both Clifford Norgate and Joanne Hayward credited in it. They're both in 5 episodes of this series, and this is the only one where the twain shall meet. Now, as I was saying, it ended badly, like so much. It's bitter, it's distressing to look back at the end, but that doesn't change how wonderful it was along the way, how much joy and comfort Knightmare brought to my life over the years, and thus I still love it. And when we truly love people and things, we come back to them in some way, as I've just done with this series of 16 commentaries. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.